And in fact, for your purposes, we're actually going to make them to fit a dress form as opposed to a given human being. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Besides measurements, what's the next thing you need to do? Well, let's think about the process for the moment. You're getting ready to drape this. How are you going to drape it? What are you going to do? What's your first step in the draping process?
We have to use some material.
You have to have some fabric, and what are you going to do with that fabric? Let's say it's muslin.
We're going to find the straight grain and the cross grain.
You are going to find the straight grain and the cross grain, that's true.
Would we start by getting it close to the body and then move out from there?
Well, kind of, but that's more the conversation of how to drape with ease.
Okay.
Let's talk about how to drape in general.
Oh.
Kristen's on the right track. You've got your muslin, you've determined your straight grain and cross grain. What's the next thing you do in the draping process?
You put it on the dress form.
You do put it on the dress form, but how do you put it on the dress form?
With the straight grain along the middle.
Why have you been putting everything with the straight grain down the center front?
Because it's easy.
Well, that's partially true. It's actually a much easier reason.
So everything lines up?
Well, that would be because it's on a fold.
Oh.
The real reason is because that's what I've told you to do, right?
I hate that.
I
Right?
hate that answer.
I've told you that that's where the grain's supposed to go. So what's the next question you have to ask yourself? Once you've got your muslin, you've got your straight and your cross grain marked.
Oh, that's to be on the grain?
Exactly. The next question you have to ask yourself is, how am I using this piece? I've told you for the purposes of all of our projects that you're putting the grain on dead center. However, is every piece of clothing like that? No, not at all. So how do you find out where the grain is supposed to go?
By asking the designer.
You know, the designer, you could ask the designer. Designer may not know. That's not really their job.
Is it?
You know, that's one of the funny things about a designer, because, I mean, they could give you this. It's just a beautiful drawing, isn't it? Okay, this is what I want it to look like. Well, how the hell do I make that out of fabric and on a human body?
Yeah.
So the designer may not actually know.
Do you just experiment?
You don't. I mean, you can, but there's an easier way. I wish we were playing hangman, because then I would write it up on the board and we'd play hangman.
You kind of just interpret how it looks.
You can interpret, but again, to me, that's kind of what Mary just said. It's kind of like an experiment. But there's an easier way and there's a better way. The next step is research. You need to take some time, eventually, but not right at the moment. Not for a little bit. The next thing you need to do is start doing your research. Why do you need to do research? Well,
Sorry.
no, you go. No, you go.
I was just going to say, so you can find out what people have done in the past, and if anybody has tried to replicate a shirt similar to what you're trying to find, and if they left behind any instructions. And you can also see, like, oh, well, you know, maybe I want the sleeves from this, and they say make it like this, but I'm also wanting the torso to look more like this, so mix and matching the patterns.
I like this idea very much because in a way it streamlines what the two of you just said. You can do all experimenting you want, but generally you're in a time crunch, right? I mean, even if you're not like, I have to have this ready tomorrow, you frequently still have other things you want to do with your time and need to do with your time. And unless you know, sometimes experimenting is fun and it's really interesting, but sometimes you need to just get in, get your information and go. Much like the designer, you've got essentially 3 ways to research. I think there are 3. Your first kind of research is this kind of research. This is what you may have heard referred to in costume tech as the blah blah blahs research. What is the blah blah blahs research?
Is it based on writing?
It is, and that writing is either done by the author or the author has pulled instances together. This is all of the written word about the clothing. You know, what were we talking about not even 5 minutes ago? Why skirts? Why ease in men's clothing? there are psychological reasons, there are sociological reasons, there are economic reasons that start to impact the way that the clothing is made, the way that it fits on the body. Being able to understand that starts to give us information. 1963. What were all women's fashions based on at that point?
Jackie Onassis.
Jackie Onassis. Who's Jackie Onassis? Well, at that point, she wasn't Jackie Onassis. She was Jackie Kennedy,
Sorry.
right?
Yeah, I said that wrong.
Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy. Why is that important for us as research? Because if we're doing a show from the 1960s, sure, we can go to fashion trends and stuff like that, but we may also want to go directly to looking at pictures of Jackie Kennedy. You know, she was the Princess Diana of her time. She was, you know, the Princess of Camelot, and so being able to understand her and why she wore what she wore is a great help to us if we're trying to recreate that kind of idea. So that's why the blah, blah, blah start to become so important. This particular book I really enjoy for a couple of reasons. It gives you